would like to say that I'm very grateful to los amigos mexicanos de la Hebrea Universidad de Jerusalem that invited me here to Mexico and are hosting all these wonderful events. And for me it's a kind of closing a circle, because back in Jerusalem the main lecture hall of the humanities is Mexico Hall. And after giving there so many lectures, it's nice to be here, finally in Mexico itself, and not only in the Mexico Hall, and to meet the people behind this organization.
Like yesterday was your first conference, yes. But how did you feel?
You have to ask the audience, but they seem to be, most of them, that they enjoyed the lecture and were quite...
They were laughing a lot.
They were laughing for the joke, this is what I know. So if they accepted the ideas too, I don't know, but they were laughing for the jokes.
And how do you like the gastronomy in Mexico?
Oh, it's excellent. It's such good food and very varied, and there's a lot of good things to eat here.
And you went to the pyramids. What did you feel there?
Yes, we went to the Teotihuacan and the Sun Pyramid and the Moon Pyramid. And for me, as a historian, the most powerful impression was to realize how an entire world of meaning that was created 2,000 years ago collapsed completely and disappeared. So that today we don't understand almost anything. We don't know what was the name of the city. Teotihuacan is the Aztec name, it's not the original name. We don't know the original name. We don't know, like, the pyramid, the Sun Pyramid, the Moon Pyramid. These are the names the Aztec gave. We don't know how they were called or what was their meaning. So it's kind of a lesson in human futility, that humans struggle so much to build an entire world and imbue it and give it meaning, and all their beliefs and religions and so forth. And after some time, it's like a sand castle on the beach. The waves of time come and everything is just destroyed and almost nothing is left.
If we take a brief review of our world today, we now have a duality. Technologically, man is more sapiens, but in his behavior and belief, there is a comeback of being more and more primitive and savage. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
I'm not sure that we are becoming more savage and primitive. For example, there is less violence today in the world than in any previous time in history. Even though there is, of course, some violence, there are wars, there are internal conflicts, but compared to any previous time in history, this is the most peaceful era ever. So, even though there are still problems, I think there is cause to be optimistic. There are some areas in the world in which the situation is deteriorating, such as the Middle East. This is partly for economic reasons. Much of the world is moving towards a new kind of economy in which the main wealth is based on knowledge. And this encourages peace, because knowledge cannot be conquered by war, by force. But in some parts of the world, the economy is still old-fashioned. It is based, like it was throughout history, not so much on knowledge and more on material assets. And when the economy is based on material assets, war and violence make much more sense, because you can conquer material assets like oil fields with violence. And therefore, in places like the Middle East or like Central Africa, where the economy is still based mainly on material resources, you also see a lot of violence. But still, we have to keep our perspective and realize that in most of the world, we are experiencing more peace than ever before. It's difficult to realize it because people today have not been alive 1,000 years ago. So we don't have a personal experience of how violent the world was 1,000 years ago or 200 years ago. But history tells us, and a lot of information, statistics tell us, that despite appearances, the situation today is far better. For instance, just to give a simple example, I came here last week from Israel. I traveled all the way from Israel to Mexico without any difficulties, without being murdered on the way, without being kidnapped by by slave owners and sold into slavery, without being robbed on the way. Back in the Middle Ages, or even just 200 years ago, even a very short journey risked all the time. You all the time risk being robbed or being kidnapped or being murdered. Today you can travel halfway across the world in perfect safety.
And why, if it's based on knowledge, why Israel has to strive to survive? Because there is a lot of knowledge and you are a proof of it. And why is it so hard to survive for Israel?
For two reasons. First of all, we are living in a very dangerous part of the world, in a very dangerous neighborhood. So even though Israel itself is a developed Western country, most of the countries around are not. And we are of course influenced by the environment. Secondly, it seems that Israel itself is perhaps not behaving in the wisest possible way to ensure its own future. And we also have to, we cannot change the environment in which we live. This is beyond our power, but we can try and change our own behavior and influence at least this part of the equation.
And what do you advise Israel to do?
I think the key for survival in the 21st century is to have strong and good connection with the global community, with the world. Israel is currently taking an opposite route. It is closing in on itself. It's becoming more isolated. And this is a very dangerous situation. Israel, from a global perspective, it's a very small country. It's a very weak country. It cannot survive on its own if it doesn't have strong and good economic and international connections with the global community.
And you mean the relationships that Netanyahu is starting? Some people say it is messing with the United States.
Not both with the United States, but also with Europe, with Latin America, with East Asia. The world today is becoming more global than ever before. The economy, technology, science, they are all based on international cooperation and international relations. A single country, especially if it's a very small country, cannot survive and cannot develop on its own.
What should the West do with the Islamic menace?
Well, first of all, it should keep things in proportion. There are 1.25 billion, 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. Not all of them are jihadic terrorists. And when you start reacting in extreme ways towards Islam, you're alienating many people who could be your allies. I think the biggest struggle with religious fundamentalism in the Islamic world is done within Islamic countries by Islamic moderates. So, and most victims of Islamic fundamentalism are Muslims. The vast majority of victims, 90-something% of the victims, are other Muslims in Syria, in Iraq, in Pakistan, in places like that. So I think the best thing the West can do is first of all to keep things in perspective, and secondly to ally itself with the moderate Muslims and help them in their fight against the Muslim extremists, and be very careful not to start a kind of all-out civilization war, the West against Islam. This is exactly what the extremists want. They want to create a situation of all-out war between the West and the entire Muslim world, and this is the one thing we should beware of more than anything else.
You said yesterday that the Middle East is bound to disappear. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that?
Not that it is bound to disappear, but it is being left behind by the currents of history. I gave the example of the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, when very few countries underwent the Industrial Revolution, like Britain and Germany and Japan. They industrialized in the 19th century. They mastered the new technologies like steam engines, like railways, like telegraph. And this gave them the power to conquer all the world, whereas most countries, like China, like India, like Mexico, like other countries, they didn't realize what was happening. They didn't join the Industrial Revolution early enough. They were left behind, and they were conquered or subjugated or pushed aside by the new superpowers, the industrial superpowers. And it took countries like India, like China, maybe 150 years to close the gap and to again become powerful and important countries. And some areas of the world did not manage to close the gap even today. Most of Africa today is still far, far behind. It couldn't close the gap that opened with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. Now, in the 21st century, we are witnessing a second Industrial Revolution, a second wave of technologies which transform the economy, society, politics, everything. If in the 19th century humankind learned how to produce shoes and textiles and machines and weapons, in the 21st century we will learn how to produce bodies and minds, how to produce artificial intelligence, how to engineer living creatures, how to engineer our own body. This is the big revolution that is going to happen. It seems that few countries undergo this revolution or lead this second revolution, and they will dominate the world. Those countries which don't understand what is happening, which don't join this new revolution, which don't master the new technologies, they will again be left behind. And this time the revolution is so far-reaching that it seems that if you don't join it in time, you will be completely left behind and will never be able to close the gap. You will simply disappear. And this is the danger that most of the Middle East, and perhaps even Israel, is placed in. While they are fighting one another about God or whatever, in other parts of the world, humans are learning to control and to produce bodies and minds and artificial intelligence and so forth. And the gap that will be created is so huge that those countries that are left behind are in danger not only of being exploited and subjugated, they are in danger of going extinct.
But Israel is joining that revolution, no? It has a very great scientific...
Yes, so far Israel has been one of the small club of advanced countries which develops and masters these new technologies like genetic engineering, like nanotechnology and computer technology and so forth. But the danger that Israel is facing is that the development of all these new technologies is based on a global effort. It's based on scientific connections and economic connections between many different parts of the world. So far, Israel has managed to be part of this movement, of this revolution, because it had very good economic and technological and scientific relations with the leading powers of the world, like United States or like European Union or like Japan and so forth. But if Israel will become isolated, either by its own actions or due to international sanctions, then it will not be able to go on being part of this exclusive club of countries, of advanced countries. And then it is in very great danger because, again, it's a small country, it's a relatively weak country, and it cannot survive on its own. in the Middle East itself, Israel is very powerful, and therefore it can allow itself to take risks within the Middle East, to do risky things because it knows I'm very strong. I can, even if there is a backlash, even if things don't go as planned, I can survive this. But on the global level, Israel is a very weak country. And therefore, on the global level, it is very dangerous for Israel to take unnecessary risks and face the possibility of being ostracized, of being isolated, of being subject to an international regime of sanctions.
You yourself, as a Jew, have you had contact with anti-Semitism, and as an Israeli, of anti-Israelism?
Maybe some contact, but not something major that I can remember or think about. I mean, in Israel, obviously, you encounter a lot of security problems. Every few years there is a war, and then they shoot rockets on your house and so forth. I was obviously...
Where do you live? Where do you live?
I live in a small village midway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, near the city of Bet Shemesh. So, saying in the last war in Gaza, there were a few days when we had rockets in our area. So I certainly have an experience of that. And
you say we shouldn't be rooted in the past, but the human being does need like identity and a sense of belonging. Mm-hmm. No? How do you manage to? How would you manage to coordinate the two ideas?
We need some common stories in which everybody believes. Otherwise, you cannot organize people. For a most clear example is maybe money. That without this fiction of everybody believing that these pieces of paper has value, we couldn't have an economy. We couldn't have trade. We could have very, very small trade on a local basis, but we couldn't have a global economy without some sort of money. So it is important to have some fictions that everybody shares. But we should always remember that these fictions are here to serve us, not we are here to serve them. The money is here so that we can create economic networks that benefit us. But if we forget that money is just a tool for that, and we become extremely attached to it, and we start living for the sake of money, this is very bad.
Are you optimistic for humanity?
I try to be realist more than optimistic or pessimistic. I think that humankind is facing enormous opportunities and also enormous dangers in the 21st century. It's impossible to say whether we will make wise choices or bad choices, but I think it's a responsibility of everybody alive today to be aware of the enormous possibilities and dangers we are facing, to try to understand what is really happening in the world, because the choices that we are making now and the choices that we will be making in the next decades will probably shape not only the future of our own species, Homo sapiens, but the future of the entire planet and the future of life on Earth in general.
What is the biggest challenge you had while making your book, while writing your book?
The biggest challenge was probably to focus on what is important. When you try to cover the whole of history, there are so many different things that draw your attention. But if you try to cover everything, you end up writing 3,000 pages that nobody can read. So the main difficulty was always to decide among all the different events, all the different processes, examples and so forth, what is really important and leave aside all the rest.
You come from a Sephardic family.
No, from an Ashkenazi family.
Ashkenazi?
Harari, it's a Hebraicized name. The original name of my family was Bleiberg. But when they came to Israel, they Hebraicized it, and because Berg is mountain and Har in Hebrew is mountain, so they chose Harari.
Why are you vegan?
Because while writing the book, two of the chapters in the book are about the agricultural revolution and about the industrial revolution. And when I was researching about these two revolutions, I was exposed to a lot of studies of the situation of domesticated animals in agriculture, and especially in industrial agriculture. And I was so horrified by the condition of these animals, that billions upon billions of animals, of chickens and cows and so forth, that are treated as if they are merely machines for producing milk or producing eggs or producing meat. And the physical and psychological needs are completely ignored. They suffer immensely just so that humans can enjoy themselves with tastier food or whatever. And I felt that I don't want to be part of it.
And how do you explain that the Jewish culture keeps existing?
Because it keeps changing. It adapts itself. Every new generation or every few generations, it reinvents itself. The difference between Judaism of today and Judaism of biblical time is enormous. It's like two completely different religions. Like today, the main thing about in Judaism is studying the Torah and studying the Talmud and praying. Back in biblical times, there was no Talmud and there was no Torah. They didn't study anything. It was a religion, when you read through the Bible, the religion in the Bible is the main thing there, is agriculture, is sacrificing lambs and oxes and so forth to God, so there will be rain. Nobody studied the Torah or the Talmud back then, because there was no Torah or Talmud back then. And you see that after the destruction of the temple, Judaism completely changed itself from a religion of priests in a temple that sacrifice animals to the gods so there will be rain. It transformed itself into a religion of synagogues, into a religion of studying sacred scriptures and philosophizing and intellectualizing, a completely different religion. And
is there a future for Judaism? In a world of cyborgs.
If Judaism will continue to change itself and to adapt to the new world, to new technologies and so forth, then yes, it could have a future. If it will refuse to change itself, it will probably, what will happen to it is what happened to the religion of the people of Teotihuacan.
Thank you.